Okay, so I'm gonna have to make this a little bit quicker than normal, probably because I have like 28% left on my phone, and by the time I'm done with this, I won't. So today has been an interesting day, and okay, so I woke up at like 4 o'clock this morning, right? And I went ahead and fed the dogs, and looked at my phone and saw that I had a text message. This was, I think, before I went to potty my brother's dogs at 4 o'clock. um, so I had a message from my cousin, the one that doesn't come around much, saying that something about could I help his mom with some stuff for him today because he passed out in the bathroom, broke his leg, or is pretty sure he broke his leg, and possibly his ankle, or he was sure he broke either his leg or his ankle, the other one he suspected. So I didn't acknowledge the message at that point in time, and I wasn't sure that I was going to, just on account of setting boundaries with family, and generally that gets run over the top of, and he's one of those that only comes around when he wants something, kind of. So for those reasons, I wasn't sure that I was going to respond. So I didn't respond at that time. I went ahead, went over to my brother's house real quick, then came back home and went back to bed. Because it was like 4:30 by then. So I slept for a while. I had my phone, I turned the volume way down, to be honest. It was only like 3 notches up because I didn't want to make it completely impossible for anybody to contact me, but I didn't want him sending me a whole bunch of messages at that point in time either. So yeah, notifications, volume, all that stuff was turned way down. So at 7:40, I woke up and I thought it was just because I had to pee. So I go to the bathroom and I come back and lay back down in bed. And then I look at my phone, and my aunt had sent me a message right around that time. So I think because I had the volume turned down, like I listened to like binaural beats or whatever overnight. So there's like additional noise playing to go along with my white noise machine. And my aunt had sent me a message right around that time asking if I could help her with him. And I didn't respond for a while because, again, I was really struggling with if I really wanted to or not. And I think I laid in bed for another 20 to 30 minutes before I responded and decided I would go ahead and go along with it. So nothing today went as expected, which I have a general idea of things that I want to get done in the daytime, but really there's no specific order anything has to happen. And you know, some things are, if it doesn't get done, then well, no big deal, you know. But there's like some things that I definitely wanted to get done, and I'd say I actually did more than I anticipated on that end. You know, but even when I was like debating at 4 if I was going over to my brother's house at that point in time, it's like, well, if I don't go right now, then I would have to go over there later, and then it would give me an excuse to not go to the thing with, or to help my cousin or whatever. It's like, yeah, screw it. I'm not messing myself up. There was one time that when I was dog sitting for my brother's dogs that I didn't go early morning, and then it like was a big ordeal trying to get back over there earlier. So it's just easier to go when I wake up to feed my dogs. So I went ahead and rolled with that, but didn't do a whole lot. Like I was wanting to take a shower this morning, and since that was kind of, well, she wanted to get to Greenfield by 9 because he'd set up an appointment at some urgent care clinic, and thought that if we got there by 9, then it would give him enough time, and it did. It all worked out fine. But so I recycled yesterday's clothes, to be honest, because it's like they were still there. I didn't do anything. I didn't skate like I just finished. So these are the same pants that I wore earlier and yesterday, but see, they're kind of cute. But yeah, like I changed shirts because I had my Vulture shirt on. I love that shirt. But yeah, I just figured since it was already there together, it was easier to just grab that and go rather than worry about finding new clothes, since I still want to take a shower. I wasn't planning on skating today, to be honest. That was like something I just decided around 4. It's like, it's nice. I'm going to do that. I haven't done that in a while. So, yeah. So, did not get my shower in yet, but I will. Because now I feel all sweaty. But anyway, we get over to... Was there anything I wanted to add in that little area? We get over to his friend's apartment, because it's not even his apartment. He's staying with a friend here, apparently. Or closer to here. Which was good, since we had to go collect him, and at least he wasn't on the second floor. But my aunt grabbed my grandma's wheelchair and threw it in the back of her car. I'm really surprised that my aunt drove because she doesn't really like to do that anymore. And honestly, if I'm riding with her, I don't really like to have her do that anymore, because there's a whole lot of like starting and stopping and you're the whole way. And she's like just unsure of herself in general. So it was fine. We made it. And she said we should get breakfast. Sometime while we were gone, we were going to get breakfast. The plan was Hardee's, because their biscuits and gravy are awesome, right? But it ended up not working out that way. So we collect my cousin, and he's making a big deal because his friend is on a work call from like 9 to 10. We get there around 9, and we're supposed to be silent. And like even his mom whispering, he's like, shh. Making a big deal about everything. It's like, dude, you gotta chill. This ain't working out. Like, you're not making any friends this way. Just chill. So yeah, we get him in the car. We get over to the first care place or whatever it was, and he went back, and my aunt spent the time showing me pictures of her grandbaby. And it's fine. But as I've mentioned before, I have a bit of a disinterest in the grandbaby. And it's just on account of like the whole kind of pushing back from the family connection in general. And, the fact that I'm pretty confident that my grandfather has already found his way into a new body for various reasons. Okay, I'll just give you the rundown, the brief overview. The first being, when I had that conversation with my mom about how it had to be okay for my grandfather to die at some point in time back before my grandfather died, but like the Sunday before he passed away, right? I had this conversation and I told her that, and I made the comment, I said, besides, Randa's pregnant, so who's to say he won't just like come right back in another body anyway? And yeah. So then my cousin and her husband decide that his middle name will be my grandfather's name, right? So his middle name is Donald. And I feel like that's kind of a summoning in a way. Even though, no, they don't have to come back with the same name by any means, or the same birth date or any of that stuff. It just seemed to me like it was she was calling him back kind of a thing, and then I've talked a lot about how my grandpa likes to hijack birthdays and holidays and all that stuff to take every opportunity possible to talk about his death and to obsess over his death, right? But then, okay, he ended up back in the hospital on Thanksgiving because holiday and died the day before my mom and my sister-in-law's birthday because birthday. And my mom told him, like, he literally went home to die, and she told him, you can't die on my birthday. So he died the day before her birthday. But then, she's still having to deal with all this shit for his death on her birthday. So it wasn't technically on her birthday, but it still wrapped it up that way, right? But then my cousin's baby ends up being born on her birthday, her 30th birthday. And, so continuing in on the birthday thing, which, my cousin, I'm pretty sure, probably does not care that her first child was born on her 30th birthday. That's probably like some kind of claim to fame, yay, kind of a thing, right? So I'm pretty confident she doesn't care on that end. But when running the baby's birth chart, the kid has more Pisces placements than I have Cancer placements, but he also has Cancer placements. So he has like 6 Pisces placements plus 2 Cancer placements. So tell me that's not some kind of karma right there. Because he's going to feel all the things and get pulled along in all the things and all the ways and all that fun stuff. And then I wanted to say South Node has something to do with the lessons you learned in the last lifetime, or that was like one way that I've heard it explained. And the baby's South Node is in Virgo, which was my grandfather's sun sign. So it's like, I'm pretty confident my grandfather got pulled right back into another body real quick. And I think part of it is just due to like the cords with the family and how tightly bound together everybody has been. That I feel like it was just kind of like, he's going off and then gets jerked right back in because, that the connections are still really tight there, right? So, yeah. Plus, okay, so he was born, I think, 5 weeks early, so he was a preemie. But he's like already, like, he's still before the actual due date right now, but he's been here for a month, I think. And he I think is at 7 pounds now. And my mom and my aunts and my grandma are making a big deal about, well, my cousin isn't very big and she wouldn't have been able to make it the full time if he had gone to term or whatever, and all that stuff. So it's like, there's just various things. But even in like the pictures, his expressions and everything, he looks like my grandfather. It's like, there is no way that is not my grandfather in a new body. And yeah, I told my aunt today, it's like, I don't know what it's going to be. I said, but something that kid says or does when he's 4 years old will make that clear for you. And, it's one of those things, it's like, she was interested in what I was saying, and you think so, and this kind of stuff, but at the same time, at some point in time, she's going to have some issues with the cognitive dissonance from the fact that, her Southern Baptist religious viewpoint probably doesn't agree with the whole reincarnation thing, which, I mean, religion's irrelevant, so yeah. But yeah, so there's that. So anyway, I spent this time with my aunt kind of going back and forth with that, and I called him baby grandpa. And she didn't make any kind of big deal about it. Like, I'm pretty confident my cousin would probably freak if she heard that, but whatever, it is what it is. I said that to her brother, baby grandpa, and he didn't have a problem with it. But he's also really not interested, I think, because they don't have a very good relationship, I don't think. So, whatever. It is what it is. But, so my cousin is back there, and he sends me a message at one point and said dislocated ankle and broken fibula or something like that. And he has to be, he can't walk on it for 6 to 8 weeks and has to have surgery to fix it. So it's like, ooh, that's a whole lot of chaos right there too. So, recap, my brother is moving to Oklahoma. I am biding my time until the right pieces fall into place to get me out of here. And I feel like that will be Philadelphia. But, you know, we're still waiting on the pieces to fall into place and all that. But I'm confident that they will. But then there's this interesting thing that's happened. Okay, where am I at time-wise? 22%. Okay. Ooh, that's a heron. Okay. I gotta look up heron symbolism because that's happened like 3 or 4 times in the past week. It's just like all at once there's a heron out of nowhere. And this one deck, the Sacred Destiny by Denise Linn, I believe. I have pulled these 2 cards. One, I don't think they're exactly the same. I think one's an egret and one's a heron. But I've pulled these cards multiple times this week. So, you know, it's kind of a recurring theme at this point in time. So anyway, oh, the heron distracted me, and I'm at 22%, right? I remember that. Okay, so me and my brother is on his way out, and I am waiting for the right pieces to fall into place. But then today, what ends up happening is, okay, so I currently live with my parents, and there is one other cousin that currently lives with his parents, and it's one of the youngest daughters, it's her son. So today, with this whole ordeal with my cousin breaking his leg, apparently the lease on his apartment is up in April, which is probably a good thing since he can't walk on his leg and his bedroom is upstairs, but apparently he's not been spending much time there. Anyway, so yeah. He and his current roommate had already signed a lease on another apartment that's like south of the city. And so that was a whole thing, right? But then since he broke his leg, my aunt was like, why don't you just move home? And he's like, but I already signed the lease on this other apartment, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to. So, there's been a bunch of stuff that he's apparently been working on in that direction, I guess. I think we were on our way to... So we had him with us. We went to the place. We went to see about picking up his meds, and they said they needed about a half an hour. So we took him back to the apartment we picked him up at and left him there. And then we went and got food, and then went and picked up his meds and took them back to him. And then I brought his car back to his parents' house because, you know, that's not his place. He doesn't live there. He's not on the lease or anything. So he wasn't sure how long he would be able to leave his car there without it being a problem. So it's like, well, since there's 2 of us, since I did go along with the journey, you know, I just went ahead and brought his car back. And I think we were on the way back over to the apartment to drop off the meds to him and for me to take the car. He called and said that he was able to get out of the lease. So the lease that they just signed. So in mid-April, he has to be out of his current apartment, which is going to be a pain in the ass because his bedroom's on the second floor, but then, you know, like the main living area is on the first floor. So, I mean, so that's good. But still, it's going to be shit to have to come downstairs. And it has like one of those spiral staircases. I mean, it doesn't have a whole lot of twist in it, but it's enough to make it a pain in the ass when you're trying to move a bed. So what we did because I helped them move him in over there, we went up over the banister with the bed stuff. And it was exciting. I told Beth today, I was like, on the good side, at least it'll be a lot easier getting it downstairs than it was putting it up, because this time just whoo, timber, make sure everything's out of the way and let it go. I mean, obviously we can't just be careless with it, but you know. So yeah, anyway, so we were talking about that, and then so there's a second cousin that's moving back home, and then she mentioned that the youngest daughter is also moving back home soon. And while I was skating, I was just thinking about this whole point where my brother and I have been working on disconnecting and like getting separated so we can have our own lives away from the family, right? And so he's on his way out, and then I'm waiting to see what brilliant things fall into place with the universe working its magic, if you will. And like I have some things that I can see, like, since I've talked a lot about how I wasn't really raised to have any kind of dreams for myself, you know, but yet it took a really long time to get here. But I've been seeing like this cottage kind of style house that I see me living in. And it's interesting because a lot of like the daydreams that I shift to now occur in this space. And obviously there's various reasons for that, but now that I'm able to dream bigger and to have something that it's kind of like, ooh, I really like this idea, it seems like it's really easy to shift to that space and, you know, try to figure out, okay, well, I can see like this, and this, and then, oh, well, what about this? This is something I want to consider, like the requirement of a fence for the dogs. That is a big requirement on my end, right? So, people walking out here. Where am I at? 20%. But I was thinking, it's like, I feel like since my brother and I are so much older than the rest of our cousins, because, you know, like he is 15 years older than the one that's closest to him in age, and then 18 years older than the youngest. And I am 12 years older to the next in line, and 15 years older than the youngest. So it's like, since we're finally disconnecting and getting some room and trying to unravel the mess that has bound us to the family chaos, you know, and since we're kind of disconnecting from the chaos and whatnot, you know, I've talked a lot about how, you know, like my office, well, my bedroom now space, at my parents' house, you know, I basically got the chaos out of my system by painting it onto the walls. And it's like, now that I can see it that way, it's like, ooh, that's another point. It's like I am actually able to find some clarity, because the chaos that I just carried around that I didn't even necessarily know where it was from or any of that stuff, it's like now it's out of my system and I can see it out of my system. So now I can start making other connections that I wasn't able to make before. And then on that end, I was thinking about, you know, my aunt kept talking about my cousin and his anxiety today, because he was driving us nuts with some things, you know, and honestly, I did really good at remaining detached from it, and I stayed in a great mood all morning. So, in spite of the chaos, but when she was talking about his anxiety, we were having this conversation, and it's just like, that chaos being in your system. It's like that, the way it was playing out for him was like this extreme anxiety kind of thing. And it's like, I don't think I really realized how much like Grandpa he is in that. And she agreed. But we've all had the anxiety or depression to some extent. And, especially me and my brother, like, like we had all these years where we were the two that were basically getting our life sucked out of us to give it to the old man that was obsessing over his death. And then, the others came along, and there's a gap, so it's like, it seems like we were more tightly bound to my grandfather's obsession and, nabbing of the life force kind of stuff, and then once we started setting boundaries and really stepping back, it's like it was noticeable for us when things started to shift with like our parents and with our grandparents, and I talked a while back about how like I kind of saw the deal with my grandfather, like, okay, so like he's this little spool of thread, right? And rather than letting anything go and unwinding it to live any kind of life, he was like latching on to other people's threads and like putting more on his spool, so he had more and other people have less, right? And I don't think I explained it quite like that, because this is just kind of a connections kind of coming to me now. But when I think of it that way, so like, like my mom spent her life feeding into, enabling the bad behavior, feeding her life force into his spool of thread. And when my brother and I came around, that's what we were raised to do too, is just to give him our life force rather than have our own. So when we started disconnecting and setting boundaries, it's like, we cut the cord, if you will, and we're no longer feeding into that. But then at the same time, like, okay, obviously my analogy is not without its flaws and I gotta work some of these details further, but I feel like maybe before we even cut the cord, so to speak, maybe we kind of pulled some of it back, or in some way we loosened what we had fed into his toxicity, into his little spool. And so it's like everything got more chaotic because it wasn't so tightly bound, because we weren't still feeding into it. It's like it was disconnected, and then I'm going to have to work on this analogy, because like I can see like these various points of it and how it works, and then it's like, but that doesn't completely make sense, obviously. It's kind of on the fly. And where am I at? I'm at 18%, so we're still okay. But then I was thinking about how he and I are trying to disconnect now so we can go have our own lives to some degree, because that we were never raised to do that. So what does it look like for him and for me to go have lives away from the family? And we've both had time away. Like I lived in Alabama with my ex for a while, and he and his wife were out in Arizona. He's lived in Oklahoma, Texas. He was in Mississippi for a time with the Air Force. So we've had these little things, but we were still basically feeding our life force into the toxic old man's bullshit. And now that he's gone, it's like the death of the toxic patriarch has definitely left a big hole of sorts, right? So I don't know how you want to think of the spool doing anything at that point in time, but like now, like my grandma and my mom and my aunts to a degree, like they don't know what to do with themselves because they were always feeding into my grandpa's bullshit, and now he's not around anymore. Right? So how do they live? What do they do? And my grandma's having a bunch of health issues, and how much of it is actually her physical health being a problem versus how much of it is the fact that she spent most of her life believing that if my grandfather passed away before she did, what point did she have in continuing to live? Because he actually said that to her mother when they were dating, like before they got married. And it's one of those things, it's like, since it's put out there and she just accepted it, she didn't push back, and my grandma, I guess, didn't push back enough either, they ultimately just ended up enabling the bad behavior and the stupid thought that he had. And so now my grandma has this sort of cognitive dissonance because she's still alive and he's gone. And like, I think my mom and her sisters, to a degree, like they don't even know they're doing it, but they're still kind of pushing it in that direction because you're not supposed to live since he's not around. He said that was the agreement. You weren't supposed to continue on because, you're not supposed to have a life if he's not here, But meanwhile, they just, my grandma got her living room and her hallway and her bedroom have all been repainted, and I think they repainted the doors in the hallway. Or they painted the doors in the hallway because they were just like old crappy wooden brown, and yeah, I think some of them were spray painted white. And I barely caught that. I was over there today briefly and didn't even make that connection or didn't even think to look at the doors. I walked in and it's like, it feels very springy in here. And my mom's like, it's really nice, isn't it? It's like, kind of reminds me of Peeps. Like the little marshmallow things. But yeah, so after I got my cousin's car to my aunt's house, I walked over to my grandma's house because, of course, we left the wheelchair for him in case he needed to do anything beforehand. But I told him, it's like, okay, we're leaving this chair now, but there's another chair you're going to get, and because this is the one grandma uses, and the other one was just in storage, so this was the easier one to find in a hurry. So it's like, I said, your mom will be switching that out later. He said, okay. But yeah, I had to make sure to let her know, or make sure to let him know and put it out there again so she didn't forget. But then my grandma, my aunt set her a doctor's appointment for today because she's having issues with her leg, and there's a whole lot of threes up there. And yeah, so I went over, got the other wheelchair out of the shed, put it by the chair. It's like, okay, whenever you go, take this with you, stop at the place the cousin is at, switch it out, and then we'll be done with that whole situation for a minute anyway. So yeah. But what else was there? Where am I at? 16. I'm just gonna have to keep checking because obviously I'm sucking the battery real quick. So it's like 1 o'clock before I got back around here, and then I got over to my brother's. See, I got all out of order. Normally I walk my dogs first, then go potty my brother's dogs, and then take them on a walk. And today, since I was running behind on that, my dogs got pushed till after theirs, because it was 4 the last time I'd gotten over there, so I wanted to go over and spend some time with them and walk them, while it was nice. We were able to do that, and I'll just have to spend more time this evening over there, because I didn't do my video over there, obviously, so because I didn't want to get more wrapped up over there and not have time to walk my dogs. So I did all those things. Then I skated, and I was just brainstorming all this stuff. And there's a lot more that I've been thinking about. Okay, I'm going to go at this point. I was thinking at one point while I was skating about how, I talked about how I caught that thing where Aaron Dowdy was talking about, like, if you have a lot of trauma, and like you feel everything when you're little, like the empaths, the feely types, you feel everything when you're little, and you tend to spend more time up in the upper chakras, and you get kind of hypervigilant with looking for areas where there's danger, and being on the lookout for those, so you can kind of, I don't know, so you can kind of be ready for them or whatever. I don't remember. Anyway, something to that effect. But he's talking about, then the more time you spend in the upper chakras, the more unsafe you end up feeling, because you get really disconnected from your body because you're so ungrounded. And it's like, that makes perfect sense. Then I was thinking about like that. I talk on here a lot about, like how, 15%. I got an alert. All the various ways that the feminine has been assaulted in various ways. And that's not just for those who are, female in this existence, whatever. That's like, everybody has both the masculine and feminine aspects within them, and it's bringing the two into unity together that gets you in touch with who you truly are, right? So, like one way that's played out is, how they, culturally speaking, societally speaking, however you want to look at it, how boys were generally raised to not be able to feel their emotions. Like, suck it up, man it up. That's, you're not, to be a man, you weren't supposed to feel the emotions and all that shit. But that's like one way that for those who generally identify as the masculine aspect, that's one way that the feminine has been demonized within them, right? So then all the various other ways, for those of us in the female packaging in this existence that, have been assaulted in various ways, or, who have had people touch us because they just feel like they have some kind of right to do it or whatever. And I was actually watching this video Dr. Ramani did the other day. Of course, she does a lot of narcissism videos and whatnot. And she was talking about generational and cultural narcissism, and how, within especially patriarchal systems, there's that element of narcissism that kind of gets passed down, because there are the few that have all the power, but then, like in my family situation, go here, my family there's not like really any kind of social status or whatever, like they kind of very much in the scarcity mindset, feeling like you have to hold on to everything, clench your fists around what you can get because it's not abundantly available, and if you don't have enough, then you're going to like really struggle and really suffer at some point down the line, whatever, that kind of stuff, but because I mean, we're essentially bought into a toxic system that keeps people energetically enslaved to feeding into those at the higher levels where, they have all the power and they get the money and all this stuff because they got the rest of us convinced that there's not enough to go around, and, they can, do things like pay farmers to destroy crops so they have the say-so in supply and demand and all that bullshit, right? Because then they can stay in power and make it look like they're doing something, like, okay, asshole one. Where am I at? 14, okay. Asshole one looks like, oh, well, okay, all these things got destroyed, or bird flu. That's the thing that's currently big right now. So the eggs are like $10 or something now. Because, now they're wanting to kill off all these birds because of this bird flu thing or whatever. And I don't know. But so the cost of eggs is like way up there. But then you had asshole number two. So like the politicians, they're all feeding into the same stuff. Nobody gives a shit about the people of the country, right? Like they literally are just wanting to make it look like they care over the other guy. The other guy's the asshole, and gas prices went way up when he was in charge, and blah blah blah, and all this dumb shit. But really, like, it's two sides of the same coin, and they're still feeding into the toxicity, both of them, just slightly different ways of doing it. But those that are actually pulling the strings are still benefiting regardless of who's in control. So yeah. So on the cultural narcissism end that Dr. Ramani was talking about, she's talking about how, then you get to like the family structure, and men feel they have, or like, they might be beaten down in the, the world, the work environment or government, whatever, all these places, and yet they have power over the, the women in their household, kind of a thing. So I can see this like with my father and his misogynistic kind of viewpoints, and it's like he doesn't have a whole lot of power, like even in the dynamic with him and my mom, but I feel like it's made him more of an asshole to me because, he feels like he has some kind of say over me, so he can be an asshole to me, right? So he just randomly calls me a dumb bitch when he gets mad at me, and and that's okay. And when I called him out on that after the fact, there was one time we were arguing over text messaging, and I told him to stop sending me shit, and he kept sending me shit, and then he was kind of like minimizing me, and like when I was telling him, leave me alone, that kind of stuff. And the one thing he said was, I'm sorry I damaged you. It's like, fuck you, asshole, right? Because that's literally where like that whole, he doesn't have jack shit kind of say so anywhere else in the world, but because he feels like he somehow has some sort of power over me because I'm the daughter, then that's where that kind of feeds in. But it's like all this, the stuff that is happening at the family level is just playing out on the large screen, which is why like the political system's so fucked up worldwide, essentially. Yeah, okay, where am I at? 13%. Okay. How did I get there again? I don't honestly know. Like, I've been kind of all over the place because I'm trying to get the video in and also be mindful of the thing. The feminine and the masculine, the different ways that each has ultimately been damaged. Like, okay, 4. Okay, so the idea that boys weren't supposed to have emotions, and all that's done is create a bunch of bullies, right? If they're not in touch with the aspect that hurts when somebody else is picking on them, then they just turn it around and put it on somebody else and become the bullies of others that they deem as less than them for whatever reason, right? So then, in all the ways that, okay, I can immediately think to being in basic training, and, it was starting to get chilly, but we didn't have the warm weather gear on, or the cool, I forget what they call it. Didn't have the long underwear on, basically, because it had been hot during the day. It was cold in the evening. So then the drill sergeant say, make your battle buddy happy. And all they meant was get closer so you can use the body heat to stay warmer, but then the guy behind me feels like he has some sort of right to lean his dick up against me because we're supposed to get close in the group, right? And it's like those little things like that where we've been conditioned to think that women are somehow less than men, so men have the right to do whatever they want. And like men have been given this idea that to be macho, they need to go around and, have sex with as many women as possible. But then on the other end of that, the women that, have had these connections with these dudes are called whores because that's just, the guys need to spread their seed and all that bullshit. But the women are, whores because that's the cultural conditioning. But in so doing, I know, okay, I've talked about how back in the fall when I was out with my mom, my aunt, and my grandma, we went over to the rehab place where my grandpa was, and then stopped for lunch on the way home. And I talked about the waitress that winked at me, right? And the big thing that I realized that came from that was the universe was trying to show me that people in the world around me were aware that my energy was in some way shifting. And that was a way that I was made aware that, yes, the world around me is somehow picking up on these things that are changing about me, right? But then, that point where it's like, at the time, I thought it was because I was straight, but it's like, it's not because I was straight. It's just because I knew that the person that I am looking for in this lifetime is in the masculine packaging, right? So, and that's like, literally, it's like, we're connected, the two sides of the coin. We're connected and we are having our own life lessons and experiences, but at the same time, we are also helping each other through the difficulties that we get stuck in. Like, so when I spent most of my life afraid of using my voice and unable to use my voice, and then he goes into music and, he's singing and screaming in some of those, it's like that served as a way to also help me release the blocks against using my voice as well. But at a time that I was unable to do it for myself, then he was able to do it for both of us, because I was stuck. But then I'm sure there are things that I have also helped him on that end. But that's just like, that's one of those when I was skating that I really made sense of, and I'm at 11% now. So then, okay. So this is the masculine and feminine thing. Okay. So then I'm thinking about how that whole thing, the waitress, and realizing that it was just to show me that the world around me is picking up on the changes in my energy. And as I spent more time with that, I realized it couldn't have come from somebody that identifies as male, because in my lifetime, a lot of the things that I've had to work through healing, especially in this channel, has been the various ways in which men in my life have not been safe, right? And that, culturally speaking, that's a whole thing, right? That's a worldwide thing, I think, is generally men have been unsafe, right? Because that was the conditioning that most of them have been in, that they are somehow above women, and thus, they turn into bullies against women. But the thing is, in the divine masculine, because the patriarchal systems, the distorted masculine, and very much antichrist viewpoint and way of being, and that is exactly why religion pushes that, is because religion wants to remain in control and have some be benefiting over others. And so, women are supposed to be submissive, and they pass on these bullshit ideas and all that stuff. So, where am I? 11 stall. Okay. So yeah. That's why, for me, I've always been really protective of the good guys, and what the good guys has ultimately been about. It's the guys that are out there trying to do their own thing, live their lives, learn their lessons and all this stuff, and not harm others. And especially white guys have kind of been, notorious for the bad behavior and the patriarchal bullshit, so think, yeah. You think back to slavery and colonialism, all these kind of things. Yeah. Generally they have not been safe, right? So I have always been especially protective of the good guy types, which is the types like my brother that are not trying to harm anybody and are actively trying not to do that, but then still get pulled into this bullshit kind of dynamic because of the world we live in. Just because of the systems that are in place. So because they don't demonize women and don't think they're above women and are somehow maybe more in touch with the pain aspect, because I feel like more than anything, that's something that in this current world, the good guys are most familiar with, is that pain that keeps getting, dumped on them because of everything else going on in the world. Whether the patriarchal types deem them as somehow weaker or whatever, but in reality, it's they're the most in touch with who they actually are, and the system does not like that. So then I was thinking while I'm skating, it's so it makes sense that especially, so Divine Feminine is most active up in the upper three chakras. It's kind of her area, and the masculine is more in the lower chakras, which makes sense that in this world, men tend to be more focused on, physical kind of monetary and all that kind of stuff, providing kind of things, and then And I think part of where the patriarchal system has demonized the feminine is because of all the woo-woo stuff, but then like Aaron Dowdy's talking about with how, if you're unsafe in the lower chakras, then you spend more time in the upper chakras looking for the danger in the world around you. And it's like, that actually makes perfect sense with why like religion has tried to squash women in general, and why there are ideas of, like okay, my nose itches. I'm at 7%. Okay. Gotta wrap it up. Anyway, I was spending time with like this upper chakra thing, right? And like, I've always felt more active up here, and now I feel like I'm in more of my masculine, my own system. I am in my masculine to heal the lower chakras where I always thought I wasn't good enough, where I didn't think I was capable of doing things and all this stuff that, I had that conversation with that girl after class the other day talking about, if you feel disconnected from your body, and it's like, that's it. It's like, it's largely women have felt unsafe in their body because, men in general, not all men by any means, but in general, men, going back to that whole point of like, you're more likely to be raped by somebody, that kind of a thing. The rape, the assault, and the various other ways, though. I'm at 5%. I gotta wrap it up. All the various other ways that like that kind of stuff plays out. So it makes sense that, we're operating more up here, but we're trying to bring it into the lower chakras and ground it in. So like getting into your body is important. And I'm just going to wrap it up and leave it there because I don't want the video to die before I'm done. So as always, I appreciate you. Until next time, see ya.